All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about one single terrifying moment. A moment that took this brilliant young law student and put him on a collision course with, well, the entire medieval world. And it all kicks off with a vow. A vow made in a flash of lightning.
So, I want you to picture this. It's Germany, July 1505. You've got this hot, dusty road, and there's a young university student, a guy named Martin Luther, just walking back to school after visiting his folks. Pretty normal, right? Well, then the sky just goes black. Out of nowhere, this crazy storm just erupts, and then bam, a bolt of lightning strikes so close it literally throws him to the ground. In that split second of just pure abject terror, he's convinced he's facing God's judgment. So he squeals out this desperate plea to St. Anne, who just so happens to be the patron saint of miners, which is what his dad was. And that vow, that's the vow that changes everything.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. The irony is just staggering. I mean, look at this. The guy who vows his life to the church, he's the one who ends up shattering medieval Catholicism. The guy praying to saints, he's going to be the one to say, nope, we don't do that anymore. It just raises this massive question. How does a man in his most desperate act of faith become the guy who tears it all down? That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve here.
Okay, so a lot of people today look at this and think, oh, it's simple. They say his dramatic vow was just, a psychological escape. So let's dig into that idea first. Let's see if the evidence holds up. The theory goes something like this. Maybe this wasn't really about God at all. What if the monastery was just a convenient escape hatch? A way out from a super strict upbringing and parents who expected way too much from him. And you know what? At first glance, the evidence looks pretty solid. We have this quote, supposedly from Luther himself, talking about his mother caning him till he bled, all for stealing a single nut. I mean, wow. He even seems to tie that kind of discipline directly to why he ran off to the monastery. And it doesn't stop there. He tells another story about his father whipping him so badly that he actually ran away from home and was scared of him for a while. So you put these two stories together, and you get this picture of a really harsh, almost brutal childhood. It seems open and shut, right? Case closed. He was just running away from home.
Yeah, but not so fast. Because when you look closer, the evidence starts to point in a totally different direction. See, his father wasn't someone to run away from. He was someone Luther wanted to please. His dad's big dream was for Martin to be this big-shot lawyer. He was so proud, he even bought him these super expensive law books, the Corpus Juris, and started calling him with a formal, respectful you, see. And Luther? He was devoted to his dad. He was absolutely crushed by how furious his father was when he became a monk. So this wasn't an escape. This was him throwing away his family's biggest dream.
So if he wasn't running from his family, what on earth was he running from? Well, to really get a handle on the terror he felt in that thunderstorm, we've got to step into his world. And let me tell you, it was a world gripped by a very, very specific kind of fear.
You have to remember, this is not our world. We have science to explain things. They didn't. For Luther and everyone he knew, the spiritual world wasn't some abstract idea. It was real, it was tangible, it was everywhere, all the time, woven into the very fabric of daily life. And I mean, look at this. Their world was alive. The woods, the water, they were full of elves, gnomes, sprites. People honestly believed that sinister demons could just whip up a storm or a plague. Witches? Oh yeah, they were stealing milk and butter. And this wasn't just some quaint folklore for peasants. We're talking about Luther here, a university student who was 100% convinced that a nearby lake held captive demons, and if you threw a rock in, you'd unleash a massive storm. That was his reality.
And here's the kicker. His own religion cranked that anxiety up to 11. It was this constant push and pull between hope and fear. On one hand, God is your loving father. On the other, he's the guy who throws lightning bolts. Jesus is the kind son, but he's also the unbending final judge. Can you imagine the psychological tension? I mean, which one are you going to get when you die, the hug or the hammer? And of all the images the church put out there, one of them really, really dominated the age. It's the one that haunted pretty much everyone. It wasn't Jesus the Good Shepherd. Oh no, it was Christ the Judge, the one sitting on a throne, ready to decide where you spend eternity. This image was absolutely everywhere. In books, in art, you couldn't escape it. And the symbolism was crystal clear. You see Christ there on the rainbow. Out of one ear comes a lily,
That's for the saved, heading to paradise, sweet. But out of the other ear, a sword. That's for the damned. And below them, you've got devils literally dragging people by their hair into the flames of hell. It's intense.
And for Luther, this wasn't just some theological concept. This was personal. This was real. He saw these pictures, he heard the sermons about it, and he later admitted he was utterly terror-stricken at the sight of Christ the Judge. Okay, so let's recap. You live in a world you believe is crawling with demons. Your own religion is constantly reminding you of an angry, judging God. What do you do? Where do you turn? Well, the church had an answer. And it wasn't just an answer, it was the answer. A guaranteed, ironclad solution.
That answer was monasticism. Becoming a monk, that wasn't like choosing a career path. It was seen as the surest, safest way to save your soul. Think of it like the ultimate spiritual life insurance policy.
And the sales pitch was pretty good. The benefits were laid out plain as day. First, taking the cow, becoming a monk, was like a second baptism. It wiped the slate clean, restored your innocence. Second, your prayers and repentance as a monk, they were like supercharged, more powerful. And third, popular belief was that if you died wearing a monk's habit, you got preferential treatment at the pearly gates. It was basically the VIP pass to heaven. And Luther had seen with his own eyes what this level of devotion looked like. When he was just a boy, he saw this prince, Prince William of Anhalt, who gave up all his wealth and power to become a begging friar. And Luther's description is haunting. He said the guy had worn himself down so much with fasting and prayer that he looked like a death's head, just bone and skin. That's not an exaggeration. That was the reality of what it took to try and earn your way into heaven. Okay, so now that we have all that context, let's go back to that road, back to that storm, because now we can see that moment for what it really was. It wasn't him running away from his father. It was him running towards God in a desperate, panicked sprint. So when that lightning bolt hits the ground, you gotta understand, for Luther, this isn't just weather. In that one terrifying flash, his whole worldview comes crashing down on him. He sees it all at once. God the all-terrible, Christ the relentless judge, and all those demons from the folklore. And they're coming for him. So his cry to St. Anne, it's not random. It's a terrified man pulling the only emergency brake the church had ever shown him. He makes that vow to save his own soul. And he doesn't have stephead either. He doesn't pick some easy, cushy monastery. No, he chooses one of the strictest orders out there, the Augustinians. And he does this knowing his father will be absolutely furious. He's trading his dad's approval for what he thinks is his only shot at salvation. This decision was made under the most extreme spiritual pressure imaginable. And this, right here, this is the great irony of the entire Reformation. This is the whole point. Martin Luther's rebellion, it didn't start because he was a man of little faith. It started because he was a man of too much faith. The Great Revolt against the medieval church began with a man desperately trying to be the most perfect, obedient follower the church could possibly create. So he went into that monastery to find peace, to finally quiet the terror in his soul. He took the church's ultimate answer, the one they said was a sure thing. But that just leaves us with one last massive question, a question that will set the stage for everything that happens next. What happens when you do everything right? When you follow the rules perfectly and you take the ultimate cure the system offers, but it's still not enough?